Of chit-chat from this room. Okay, thank you very much. Everyone is here. We're now starting the second plenary of our Islamophobia conference. And good afternoon to anyone joining us on Facebook Live, assuming it is in fact working. This is the second of our two plenaries, and the theme for this plenary is how counter-extremism, policies, and state racism and Islamophobia change the way we organise. I'm going to start out with Moazzam Begg, who's Outreach Director of CAGE, and we'll get contributions as well. I'm not in fact going to start with Moazzam. I'm going to start with Ahmed Uddin from the Islamic Human Rights Commission. Also on the panel, we've got Malia Bouattia, former NUS President, Tasneem Ali from the Muslim Women's Association of Edinburgh, and Moazzam Begg from CAGE. And it's very good, we've got my own programme notes that I'm going to go over to here.
Assalamu everyone. Good afternoon. So we've got to mention a couple of quotes from the election results and a few comments from some of our friends. So Malia Bouattia tweeted out, "My party must start healing its relationship with British Muslims," endorsements from Tommy Robbins and Katie Hopkins. And then Katie Hopkins responded by saying, "Your party? Hold on a minute, sister. I think you'll find it's our party now. Britain has Boris and the blue-collar army. Nationalism, in fact, British people first." And it just kind of really puts forward what Britain has become and has actually been creeping towards for a very long time. Now they have Boris in power, they can freely speak the way they want to speak. And it goes back to what the sociologist W.E.B. Du Bois spoke about double consciousness, about how African Americans at the time, and it applies to us, it's how there's a two-ness, there's a British and there's a Muslim, there's two souls, there's two thought processes, how we are forced to think on two separate lines. Now, something Sadiq Khan had said recently in response to why Labour had lost the elections, and he had really brilliantly said, because he's obviously priming himself to become the Prime Minister. He says, "Labour's shocking failure to tackle anti-Semitism and our inability to put forward a credible and believable set of priorities for governing have made a major contribution to the scale of its defeat." And earlier on, we were talking about how anti-Semitism wasn't the problem, it was the fact that Corbyn was pro-Palestinian. That's resulted in this kind of smear campaign against him. So this double consciousness is it's running across Muslims. You either can stay quiet or you try and present yourself in a certain format so that you don't get caught out, so that you can carry on with your lives. Now, we've got a briefing called Shrinking Political Space for CSOs in the UK, so if you download it, have a read through it. I'm going to loosely refer to it. Now, our space, Muslims' space in civil society has shrunk to the point of actually we cannot actually even say anything anymore. To the point that a single tweet leads to shutting down our space. So colleagues from CAGE and MEND and others would have been with us on this journey where they've been pushed to the edges on a daily basis. I presumably say that it's a human right to have a bank account. Not to have a bank account is you can't operate. And the CAGE has been operating for many years now without the functioning of a bank account. And with IHRC, they have tried a number of occasions to shut us down. Now, a few years ago, Douglas Murray put a tweet out saying that the Islamic Human Rights Commission is an extremist terrorist organization, and it needs to its charity status should be taken away. So the Charity Commission comes in and starts an investigation, calling us, saying that we are accused of being terrorists and extremists. So it's occupying, where is it proof that we are any of those. So after a little investigation, they said, well, actually, you're not an extremist or a terrorist organization, but we're going to investigate you anyway. I said, on what basis are you going to investigate us? Give us the evidence, why you're investigating us, and we'll provide any evidence, any documentation that you need to. They carried on this whole process back and forth, asking for information, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It took them 5 years and before they actually closed the case and said, there's nothing wrong with you guys, we'll make a few recommendations, just make your minutes a bit slightly more expansive, and that was the end of it. But if you compare that to the Oxfam scandal that happened a few years ago, there was proof of serious sexual misconduct and abuse by its volunteers and its staff members. That investigation from open to close took 16 months. 16 months. When the Islamic Human Rights Commission Trust made a complaint against UK Torment, a charity in the UK that was raising funds for supplying equipment to the IDF, occupied territories. This is illegal in British law. It's illegal, and they were supplying IDF with these gloves so that in the winter months they can be in the comfort of warmth in the gloves so they can pull the trigger. That investigation took 4 months, and not even a caution. 4 months. And similarly, there's another Zionist charity we complained about, same thing. Within 4 months, they were open and closed. Now you've got the likes of Andrew Norfolk, who regularly writes rubbish articles, who's been debunked as a journalist. He wrote a stupid article about the fostering situation where a Muslim family in Tower Hamlets was apparently forcing Islam down the throat of a child. What he forgot to tell us about that the child was of Muslim heritage. Now, the reality was that Tower Hamlets and a few others have got together and had proven the case that he was lying completely. Completely it was a lie. This very same Andrew Norfolk has written many articles about the Muslim NGO sector, time and time again, making up lies. Now, the Muslims are great at many things, but the one thing that we're very good at is charity, right? So every Ramadan, the month we're fasting, we donate around £130 million on that particular month. It's estimated £500 million of charity money is given to charitable causes, both here in the UK and abroad. It's a very British thing to do, but we Muslims can't do the very British thing. We're not allowed to. So in 2014, an overwhelming number of cases from the Charity Commission were investigating Muslim charities, around 38%. 38%. We only represent 5% of the British population. So there is this kind of creeping apparatus and tools in place to kind of shut us down bit by bit. Even the very good things that British folks don't like to do. So even when we win the British Bake Off, it's just not good enough. You're just not British enough. So when we go back to the fostering situation, Muslims are at the time I was actually doing some research for the fostering network, and there was this kind of overwhelming need and evidence that more and more Muslims or more people from the DME community should take up fostering. In England alone, there's 7,000, in the next 12 months, 7,000 new fostering parents are needed. In Northern Ireland, it's 250, in West Scotland, it's 500, Wales has got over 500 as well. But we're not allowed to foster. We're not allowed to take care of people that we might be forcing Islam down the throat. Now, if we go back to this briefing report where another idiotic journalist called Andrew Gilligan, who time and time again writes in the Times, he wrote a piece exposing two academics called Professor Tahir Abbas and Dr. Saleh Khami. Now, they were commissioned by this Commission for Counter-Extremism to write a number of papers talking about the issue of counter-extremism. Now, this is an issue that we take issue with because the Islamic Human Rights Commission had said that the counter-terrorism measures has gone too far for us to even engage with. So we are stepping away from it because it's just become, not only do you not listen to us, it's actually become counterproductive because the very NGOs that actually take part in the process get burned by the same reports. Now, Andrew Gilligan thought that it was absurd enough that both Tahir Abbas and Saleh Khami had retweeted a tweet that he classed as anti-Semitic, that they would come to the Islamic Human Rights Commission and another anti-Semitic organisation to launch the book. So he writes an article in the Times, and as a result, Sarah Khan, our dear friend Sarah Khan, who said that, oh, we need to take these two academics off unless they go through this anti-Semitism training. One of the academics decided to go through the training, and one decided to drop out. Both the academic articles was dropped. No explanation given. It's not because that these aren't qualified academics. These are academics between them, have 30 years of academic experience, have written hundreds of journals, have written numerous books, have peer-reviewed journals written by them. So I'm going to slowly start wrapping up. So there is this two competing identity for Muslims. One is of being Muslim and being British, and we're forced down that kind of conversation where we can't be both at the same time, because if we are Muslim, our loyalty must be somewhere else, and we cannot be truly British. And we must be questioned, and therefore what we say must be questioned every time we utter something. And therefore, even if there's something that that's very British thing to do, it's just not good enough, because you must be questioned even in the very British thing we do. I'll hand it over to Moazzam Begg. Thank you.
Thanks so much. As in the scene for this conference, it's worth reminding people that this is co-organised by IHRC and SACC, and you may not see much sign of IHRC on the ground here because, unfortunately, like a lot of other Muslim organisations, they don't really have that much of a base in Scotland, but the whole of the concept comes from IHRC. A string of conferences that have run over the last, I think it's 6 years, and a network of like-minded speakers who've contributed to those conferences. So thank you to Ahmed for really from SACC for making possible this collaboration and the conferences we've had with you. Now I'll hand over to Malia. You've got a bit of time in hand because Ahmed was quite succinct.
Assalamu alaikum. Hi everyone, thank you for coming today. I can't really hide the fact that it's quite difficult to be giving a speech that's supposed to provide deep analysis and also inspire a fight back when following the elections. All I really wanted to do was bury myself under the covers and pretend it didn't happen for most of us. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that I guess we've never really been here before, believed a politician, let alone believed in one. We've never had as much faith in the possibilities of a political party, given the many limits of the system in which it functions. And that, in many ways, has shown the importance of the political project that so many across the UK, and their hundreds, thousands, even millions, wanted to take part in. This is, of course, not to mean that there wasn't many shortcomings, especially when it came to the question of counter-terrorism. As it became increasingly clear that Corbyn wasn't going anywhere, choices were being made around him that matters relating to securitisation would be deprioritised for those relating to the economy. At best, MPs and vocal voices to the left of the party would call on a review of the prevent duty, but by the time that the counter-terrorism and border security bill arrived at our doorstep, there was practically no opposition from the party. And this was a huge issue, especially since we didn't imagine what would need to follow the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act, especially with mounting opposition from the grassroots, trade unions, and even UN officials, but alas, it came. More intensified policies, more criminalisation over information seen or accessed, less justification for the not-so-random and non-evidence-based stops at borders, less rights upon such stops, and the list goes on. Those under threat range from students and academics to journalists, lawyers, human rights workers, dissenting voices, and so many more, whose work requires research into incredibly sensitive issues, but who could now face prison sentences. In addition, it's expanding prevents reach to local government, which impacts those providing and receiving social services. Mostly, what the lack of considerable opposition that should have been carried since the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act has meant is the battering of activists, campaigners and movements on the ground. If we're to look at the state of the Palestine solidarity movement across education, trade unions and local councils, it doesn't leave us much hope. Activists, politicians, even models and YouTubers, it seems, have been relentlessly publicly attacked for their anti-colonialist views on the occupation. Try speaking at a students' union event these days, aside from the mountain of bureaucracy, students on the left fighting racism, opposing colonialism, climate justice and so on, all have to tiptoe as they face considerable risk that their speakers will be denied, often by those who have absolutely no idea what is an actual threat to open, fair and free speech. The anger that efforts built, coalitions developed, should have been channeled to mount a stronger opposition, because ultimately the demands that the counter-terrorism apparatus be dismantled, that civil liberties should be protected and improved, are core elements of the political project. To see the need to maintain power, or at least be in with a strong chance to reach number 10 by sidelining this defence of rights and freedoms showed the short-sightedness. So what now under a stronger Tory government? We expect more of the same, more intrusion, more criminalisation of dissenting voices and spaces, a shrinking of basic rights, which they've made clear in the election by targeting the Human Rights Act, more power to the secret services, and given the sordid imagination of the right, God knows what else. Indeed, Boris Johnson is the candidate of the intensification of the most reactionary and racist elements of the Tory campaign, whilst his election strategy was effectively to say nothing else than get Brexit done. The reality is, of course, that what we are about to be met with is a barrage of attacks on civil liberties across the board. A number of things are clear. First, the new Johnson government will target the Human Rights Act as part of its Brexit strategy. This will open up the door for a further erosion of basic civil liberties and a greater leeway for the government to act with total impunity. And secondly, in a long article in the Telegraph Johnson laid out his vision for his Tory Britain. And central to this was his claim that we must reform human rights laws to shift the balance to our security and intelligence services. He then bemoaned the fact that the state is constrained by the right to private life. The way that Johnson jumped on the London Bridge attack to argue for tougher sentencing and more restrictive early release laws should also remind us that the intensification of the so-called war on terror will also have wider consequences for the nature of policing and repression across the board. Thirdly, central to this will be the assault on Palestine activism. The Tory manifesto highlighted the party's commitment to return to its criminalisation of the BDS movement. And the first line of fire here will be the right of council to divest from companies on the ground of foreign policy, on the ground of foreign policy concerns. This battle is of course not new. In fact, it's currently going through the course, and PSC is arguing the case in appeal right now. And this is something that I want to stress as well. None of this is in fact new, whilst the attack will feel particularly strong given the missed possibility of having a different, progressive and anti-imperialist PM. The war on terror is nearly 20 years old. This is a struggle that we have been fighting well before the election and will unfortunately continue to fight for the foreseeable future. The question now really is what to do next. And there is a golden rule, which is that the only way to defeat unjust laws is to make them impossible to implement, and the only way to defeat unjust governments is to become ungovernable. The resistance that is necessary is one of mass civil disobedience. This is especially important here because the war on terror is increasingly geared towards mobilizing the whole of society in its policies, surveillance, and undermining of civil liberties. Teachers, lecturers, psychologists, doctors, social workers, and even nursery school staff are all expected to become extensions of the state and to implement the hunt on so-called radicalization in their workplaces. The focus for us then should be to organise through the labour movements, through local campaigns and trade unions, collective campaigns of absolute refusal. There have been early examples of lecturers trying to do that, but so far these examples have lacked organisation and mass character. When thousands start saying publicly that these laws and guidelines are unjust, are discriminatory, and most importantly, that they will refuse to participate, then it seems to me that we'll start bringing this infrastructure of repression into huge danger. Similarly with Palestine, the best and only way to attempt to criminalise solidarity, to illegalize BDS, to conflate anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, is to step up our activism against it, to increase the initiatives and to turn up the pressure. We need more student groups, more trade union branches, more community campaigns. We need more specific targets and well-planned efforts. And I want to highlight the example of the work done by the student branch of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. They've identified the investment of universities across the UK in arms companies whose weapons are used against Palestinians. They're now calling on students and staff across universities to put pressure on their managers to cut these investments. And also a particular shout out to Warwick students who've been partaking in occupation since the visit of a former IDF colonel, was it? Anyway, someone complicit with no idea happily complicit, speaking on their campus. So the answer is to mourn our defeat, but also and always to organise. And here we should not forget what has just happened in every city and every town of this country. If hundreds and thousands of activists felt passionate about the possibility of a different, a better society, they can be recruited and organised to fight for it the whole year round. And as the impressive demonstration in Glasgow showed last night, the fight is definitely back on. Thank you so much, and solidarity.
Thanks, Malia. Obviously, so scared about that 5 minutes. No, should sort of close. So, again, we can turn now to Tasneem from Muslim Women's Association of Edinburgh.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome. As the other speakers have said, we are all deeply saddened about the result of Thursday's election. The Tories will continue with their terrible policies, creating division amongst our communities, trying to. We will expect to see Islamophobia rising. Our services will continue to be harmed to benefit the wealthy. So what do we do now? Well, we have to be ready to be a louder voice for those who do not have a voice, which is what Jeremy Corbyn was standing for. Muslim Women's Association is a small grassroots organisation, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we do at ground level in our community. As the voice of the Edinburgh Muslim community, we have taken part in the Islamophobia conferences in Scotland since 2013. But during that time, we have seen anti-terror legislation roll in prevent duty into workspaces, so that our educators, GPs and public sector workers are expected to be informers for the police. As way members participated in mandatory training for prevent, it became obvious how unsound the science behind identifying those likely to Islam as a religion and Muslims as individuals are inherently inclined towards violence. So we at MWE work hard to build community relations to debunk these toxic myths built up by the racist government policies and which are perpetrated by media at all levels. In May 2016, Muslim Women's Association had an opportunity to take part in an Edinburgh Council hate crime training pilot scheme. Wendy Henderson, Health Improvement and Diversity Manager for East Edinburgh neighbourhood, worked with Zareen Taj to put together a dual presentation on what constitutes a hate crime and the nature of Islamophobic hate crime. Wendy covered what constitutes hate crime and all the protected characteristics such as age, disability, gender, etc. Zareen took the opportunity to debunk myths about Muslims and Islam and in particular Islamophobic nature of prevent strategy, which all public sector workers have to undertake. She was able to use slides outlining SACC's objection to prevent and also to explain normal practices of how racially diverse Muslim people in Edinburgh to illustrate that a person practicing their faith is not a person becoming radicalised and in need of reporting to the police. Zareen's talk included recognising and avoiding Islamophobia and taking questions on aspects of the faith and practices that people did not understand. The pilot session in East Edinburgh was well attended and well received. This led to 3 further sessions. So MWE will be looking to have similar partnerships with the Council to combat Islamophobia as long as we have the right to challenge prevent. At that event, Wendy also covered third-party reporting, which prompted MWE to find out that our central mosque in Edinburgh was in fact a third-party reporting centre, but the Muslim community were not aware of it. We made sure it was publicised and made it easier for people to report an incident at the mosque if they weren't comfortable to go to the police directly. So we've been tackling hate crime issues as individuals, but they now felt empowered to use our rights to follow up incidents. MWE pushed back against the shrinking civil society spaces that do not allow groups to book venues because 1 or 2 speakers attending do not pass the approved list for the venue. We work at grassroots level as a multicultural and multi-ethnic group that is happy to work with other faith and community activist groups. In this way, we work to the best of our abilities using the skills of our volunteers to combat hatred against Muslims fueled by far-right, Trump and Boris Johnson. An important aspect of challenging the far-right narrative is to be visible against those bringing hate into our communities. So MWE join anti-racist protests against the far-right when they assemble in our towns. By being visible, we are actually approached by groups like Jews Against Trump to protest the Muslim ban. This joining forces really helps to resist the shrinking spaces where we can stand confident to be Muslim. As expected, the terrible stabbings of London Bridge have left many injured, and where the wonderful Jack Merrick and Saskia Jones sadly lost their lives, have been used to spew hatred and the same Islamophobic tropes that we have worked so hard to extinguish. Islam does not equal terrorism. Osman Khan is not known to have carried out any act of violence before he was imprisoned for 16 years for plotting to bomb key areas of London and to kill the then Mayor, Boris Johnson, and others. Yet 8 years after his release, he attacked defenceless people, hurting and killing the very people who were trying to help him. This humane act, there should rightly be shock and sadness, but why is there a heightened fear of suspicion of Muslims after that attack? The speakers here will say, do not criminalize all Muslims because of the random evil act by one. No white male murderer has ever been used to label a whole race or creed of people. Why don't we look at the hundreds of daily acts of kindness done by Muslims you see, and the brother was talking about charity, who represent us. Our women, our volunteers and members are motivated by the teachings of our faith to work with the good of our Muslim community and the wider community that we live in. Our events and activities are open to all, We successfully held meetings on issues of climate change, racism, Islamophobia, peace events to bring grieving Christian and Muslim communities together after the New Zealand and Sri Lanka attacks. We find this is the best way to have conversations with individuals and groups to counter the hate and disinformation prevalent everywhere these days. Our personal approach to host events with other groups and make the meetings as social and time to chat afterwards. Each year we make new relationships with people and help with the vital education needed in society to combat racism and imperialistic views of Muslims and Islam. We have our yearly multicultural celebration, Love Culture, Hate Racism, on Saturday the 15th of February in Edinburgh. So this showcases music and performers from Edinburgh of diverse backgrounds, as well as activities and stalls from community groups. So our latest decision are the Scottish Book Bug. So anti-racist education is starting from the newborn and the preschoolers who join us, and so please do join us. So even though we are a very small grassroots organisation, we are able to make a positive impact within the community by working with like-minded associations like SACC to create our own spaces, such as this conference, and we can have discussions and build bridges with the wider community, and we pray that collectively we can move forward and bring small changes, thereby bringing hope to those struggling in difficult situations. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tasneem. Just hear from Moazzam.
Brothers, sisters, friends, Assalamu alaikum, good evening or good afternoon. When I was coming up here, I passed a march and I was sitting with my friend in a coffee shop. And the first thing I saw was British flags, loads of them from a distance. And then I heard the sounds of drums and flutes. And I said to my friend, I think it's the EDL. Then I thought, no, EDL don't do flutes. And as we got out, we got closer and closer, we saw a group of people marching. And it seemed, I thought, perhaps maybe it's the military. And as I got closer and closer, I saw the signs, and I saw some people wearing bowler hats. Like, nobody wears bowler hats, except for the orangemen. Now, let me tell you, I have been an orangeman too, in the past. We were dressed in orange, but that wasn't out of choice. These orangemen were marching up and down here, and I wasn't sure. My immediate reaction was, should we walk past these people? Will they attack us? Will they say something? And as we were walking past, I heard somebody say something. And excuse me for swearing here, I'm only relating what the guy said. He said bastards. But he didn't say it to us. It was just an older Scottish man looking at those guys walking past, and he was saying it to the marchers. The Islamophobia that exists today on the streets is palpable. You can feel it. I felt it when I saw those flags. And it is palpable because it has passed, as said, Baroness Bouattia said famously in 2013, it has passed the dinner table test. Meaning that you can sit around your dinner table, talk about football, EastEnders, and how bad Muslims are. And nobody will bat an eyelid. In fact, as you know very clearly, that the most powerful men in the world, as well as being the most stupid men in the world, happen to be open Islamophobes. And just yesterday, another one proved that point. Before I just go into the details of what I want to say, it's important for me to say that I'm standing next to people here that were involved in campaigning for me with my father right from the beginning. The IHRC and the Rasul Shajari, right from the beginning, stood with my father when many Islamic and Muslim organizations were too afraid because they thought this is a matter that simply will cause too much problems for us as Muslims, and we want to keep our head down and not rock the proverbial boat. And also, of course, Richard. I remember my father first told me about meeting Richard and told me that he had the passion that he had and the determination of continuing to fight for the rights of people held in Guantanamo without charge or trial. And to be with him after all these years, after my father has passed away, still to stand next to this man who's been so consistent, I think is a obviously to his beliefs and his resilience, and we should applaud that. And that's why whenever he asks me, whenever he asks me, I will come up, even if it means leaving good old Bro. Now, I have to say this. The war on terror wasn't launched by the Tories. The war on terror and its architects in Britain were Labour. New Labour, but Labour. Tony, what's his name? Blair. And Jack, what's his face? Straw. These were the architects. They knew what was going on. They were involved. They gave the green light. They were part of the torture program. They were complicit in and party to the war on terrorism and the renditions program. We know this now. Why? Because in 2016 and 17, I sat down with and met with Dominic Grieve, who was the head of the Intelligence and Security Committee. And I gave evidence that we as Cage, my organisation, had produced, which included a dossier of an individual who had been tortured with British complicity before 9/11. Way before 9/11, from 2000. And I handed this dossier over to him and said, look, here's a person who says that he was tortured in Dubai. And he says the main torturers were acting directly on the instructions of British intelligence agents. I told him, and we gave him evidence, not just of the Guantanamo prisoners, but prisoners from around the world, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in Morocco, in Egypt, in Jordan. British citizens who had been detained in these countries and been tortured with questions that came from Britain, about Britain, and that the British security services were fully involved, fully complicit. And I know from my own experience that they were there every leg of my torturous journey, from the beginning of being taken into custody and even before that, and then afterwards. And the Intelligence Security Committee concluded in the end that Britain had been involved in torture, meaning that, let's just for context get it right, that Britain had been involved in war crimes. Yet to date, not a soul has been held to account. And this is following the trajectory exactly of the United States of America. The torture was done, the enhanced interrogations techniques were produced under Bush. In other words, torture and rendition and false imprisonment happened under Bush. The Obama administration said that we will stop torture, we will close Guantanamo. They said all of that stuff. And the US Senate report on torture was produced under Obama, under Dianne Feinstein. And that report came out, which accepted that they had tortured over 190 individuals. There's a film that's just come out called The Report. If you get a chance, please watch it. It's on Amazon Prime. It goes into the details of the individuals who tried bravely to expose what the CIA had done. But you see, even that was supposed to pat themselves on the back. Oh, wasn't that a fantastic exercise in openness and transparency? All they said was that we tortured some people. We admit how we tortured them. We used medieval waterboarding techniques from the 14th century that we used under the Spanish Inquisition. And after we did that, we spoke about it, we did a report, and that's it. Not a single person was prosecuted. Now, there have been instances, I've heard, that ISIS, one of the allegations against the British ISIS terrorists has been that they waterboarded their captives. And that's one of the reasons why they're deemed to be terrorists and are going to be prosecuted. So how is it possible to have this double standard? Several people, Abu Zubayr's waterboarded 83 times. So, getting back to the point is that that was all happening under Labour. So, unlike most people, though I do know and have met, and Jeremy Corbyn is, I would say, an anomaly in what I've known Labour to be. His whole persona, his belief system, his whole idea was totally different to anything we'd ever experienced. That he stands outside the courts of justice with us, campaigning on the case of Barbara Ahmed, that he doesn't get extradited to the United States because there's no prima facie case against him. In fact, he said that let him be tried over here to be released. Jeremy Corbyn was attacked not because he shared a platform with me, but because he shared a pavement with me. outside the raw course of justice. Oh, look, he's standing next to Moazzam Begg saying this. Interestingly enough, though, a couple of years before that, I shared a platform with Boris Johnson. And this was again on extradition. I was campaigning to stop the extradition of Barbara Ahmed. Boris Johnson was campaigning to stop the extradition of whom? Anybody know? 3 big bankers. The NatWest 3, who were accused of embezzling millions and millions of pounds. And of course, it was not in Boris Johnson's interest for these bankers to be sent over to America. To their credit, these bankers also campaigned and were supportive of Barbara Ahmed. And that's how, ironically, I ended up on a platform with him, but he's never been attacked for sharing a platform with me. But just wait, because I'm going to let the world go. So I have to say that these either sides of the political spectrum, Jack Straw is traditionally from the left. He was the one who denied Britain's role in the rendition program. He said that unless we believe in wild conspiracy theories, Britain had no role in the rendition program. Diego Garcia wasn't used as a stopover point to torture individuals. And of course, it's all turned out to be false, and there's been, again, no accountability. We're having a conference today about terror, about Islamophobia. And one of the things that perhaps we don't really think about is that what's the worst aspect of Islamophobia? What's the very worst thing? Somebody gets a hijab pulled off, somebody gets punched, somebody gets discriminated in the workplace, doesn't get a job. Is that the worst part of Islamophobia? No, it's not. I'll tell you what the worst part of Islamophobia is: genocide. Because the only genocide that's happened in Europe since World War II against what happened to the Jewish community was against European Muslims, the Muslims of Europe. At that time, and still to this day, we're not using the word genocide to describe it, the word Islamophobia rather, to describe it. But it is recognized as a genocide. And it's a European genocide. And out of all the groups of Europe that exist, the various groups that exist within Europe, it's the Muslims who have the genocide done against them. That's the history of Islamophobia in Europe. And when somebody like Douglas Murray of the Henry Jackson Society infamously says to the Dutch Parliament that conditions for Muslims in Europe must be made hard across the board, he is well aware that there was a genocide against Muslims in Europe. It doesn't get harder than that. So now when we see Islamophobia, you hear about it on the streets, and just recently I was just looking at the case of a young girl in Sheffield who was beaten up, physically beaten up and strangled with her own hijab, and she's 14 years old, by a 40-year-old woman, and a man that's trying to defend his wife while she's beating her up from other little children, which include her own sister, to try to come to rescue her. The police in that case gave a caution and have refused thus far to prosecute. That sticks of two things: Islamophobia on the street and Islamophobia that exists within the police force. But there's something even more structural than that. That the Islamophobia on the street can only be realized when there's Islamophobia at the highest levels of government. And to give you one example, and one very good example, is that if you take Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act, which was passed 2000, before the war on terrorism, the numbers of the people that we have that were stopped under Schedule 7 exceed 490,000, and that's just from 2009, because we don't have statistics prior to that. And that period prior to that, by the way, so you understand, from 2001 to 2009 are the height of the years of the war on terrorism, meaning the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan happened during that period. So therefore the security response to July the 7th and others was far greater, meaning there would have been more Schedule 7 stops. And we estimate that there have been at least 1.5 million stops under Schedule 7. And so, for those of you who don't know what Schedule 7 is, Cambridge University did a report in 2016 which showed that over 88% of the people stopped under Schedule 7 at one airport, were Muslims. And we constitute 4% of the entire population of the country. Now that is at state level. And how do you determine, how does a police officer determine whether he's going to stop somebody or not? Is it a random selection? I doubt it. How do you randomly select 88% of the entire population of Muslims? And under Schedule 7, you can have your fingerprints taken. You have to have, you give your DNA, you can be photographed, you can be strip searched, and importantly, you give the details or the passwords to your electronic devices. You are required by law, and you are required by law to answer every single question. If you were to commit a murder on the streets right now, and go to the police and say, I've committed a murder, the officer would have to say to you, tell you that you have the right to remain silent, and anything you say or do can be used as a court of law against you. If you get on the stop of the Schedule 7, there is no right to silence, even though there's no reasonable suspicion that you committed a crime. This law, as I said, is enacted against Muslims primarily. If you look at this plethora of laws that have been passed from 9/11 till now, it's included house arrest, it's included internment. 16 Muslims were interned without charge or trial in Britain, not Northern Ireland, in 2001. And as you heard recently from Malia and others, the Counter-Terrorism and Border Security Act now determines you to be a terrorist, not because of what you do, but because of where you are on the planet. So Islamophobia is clearly at a structural level. It's been read into law and been worked into law, and the politicians have pushed it out and felt it's okay. That's why the most powerful man in the world can say Islam hates us. That's why Boris Johnson can say that the problem is Islam. So just to finish off, I want to say a couple of things. Is that how we escape. We see that the fight is going to get bigger and much greater for us to challenge. Some of the things that we've done at Cage is that we've given evidence to the International Criminal Court for Britain's role and America's role in torture in Afghanistan, let alone in Guantanamo. We've given evidence to the police detailing MI5's agents and what they did as part of the torture program. There's been investigations carried out, but they have led to nothing, which is what we expected, but at least we had them on the back foot. We had MI5 on the back foot. We've given evidence at civil proceedings that have won an out-of-court settlement against the government. We've given evidence to the Intelligence and Security Committee. And finally, one of the things that we say is that yes, we do understand we live in a surveillance state, in a security state, and they are watching us. And the last thing they expect from any Muslim-led organisation is to say this: we are watching them right back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moazzam. I think that was partly a speech about chickens coming home to roost from our Scottish issue of the Orange Order, which I think is a long, long way past its sell-by date through the now nearly 20-year-old history of the Labour Party in torture and war, and back to the genocide, the Islamophobic genocide in Bosnia. Given that history, I don't think any of us should be at all surprised at the developments over the last year or so. Sometimes I see people who've never lifted a hand against any of us expressing shock and horror at the turn to the right, turn outside the usual rails of British politics over the last couple of years. Well, it doesn't surprise me at all, and it shouldn't surprise them. That isn't defeatism, but we do need to recognise there's a great deal of work on building to be done before we can expect to be in a position to move forward again. So thank you very much, Moazzam, for drawing attention to all of that. And if we could now open up to questions and contributions from the floor. We need to finish at 5 o'clock, so we've got a reasonable amount of time that we can talk around these issues a bit. I hope somebody's got a roving mic available. Is that true? Has somebody got another roving mic available? Yeah. Has any questions, contributions from the floor?
I'll just shout it from here. Can any of the speakers, thanks very much to everybody for what you've said, can any of the speakers shed any light on the well-known effort by Bannon when he was travelling around Europe with suitcases full of money. He had massive financing from the USA to unite the right. We know he met with Gove, he met with Boris Johnson, he met with Robinson, and he met with others across Europe. Sometimes he failed because the right can be fractious as well as the left is fractious. But does anybody know, is there any information available as to how successful or unsuccessful he was in the UK? Because it's obviously very sinister and dirty that somebody like Bannon, who said his news agency was the platform of the alt-right, the white supremacists, that he's working to try to unite Johnson with Robinson and so on. So can anybody shed any... I think what I've just said so far is absolutely true, but we don't know any more than that.
I'll just take a few more points from the floor. I think that's a really interesting point. We do know that Bannon's had a role in fueling and supporting the right globally, and like you, I don't know the specifics of what's been going on here. If anybody does, it'd be interesting. Has anybody else got a point? Question? Well, actually, does anybody have anything to add on? Next question. Maybe a reception.
I think that Bannon would probably see his efforts as successful right about now. That his aim was to set up a headquarters, if you will, in Brussels. And what we've seen, he also kind of spoke at the Rassemblement National, the newly PR'd, refreshed National Front in France as well. So he's been doing his work, but I think that in the case of the UK, with May, our argument was that you may be disassociating from like the far right on the ground as kind of unpolished riffraff, that they are not what we are and what the Conservative Party represents. I think that Boris, to a certain extent, shows a turn in that and shows stronger, more unapologetic alignments. And I think that for some, the evidence was in Robinson's membership to the Tories, was in the call by the likes of Farage to rally behind the Tories in the election and so on. I think that we have a more vocal and emboldened right-wing leader, but we cannot be disillusioned in and romanticize the ways of May, as I have seen some doing actually in relation to questions of race. That, well, at least she called a review into this, and at least she listened to black families who are victims to police brutality and so on. But we know the realities of the party, the ideologies that it espouses, and we know, and we cannot be fooled into thinking that, however refined and covert the institutionalized hate has been by the leading political party in the past. It lays the foundations, it empowers, it emboldens, it helps organize, and it helps normalize the hatred that we then effectively see when we have hundreds, at times thousands, marching in the name of white supremacy, in the name of effectively genocides of countless minority communities. I think that irrespective of whether they are as effectively organised and why the left just cannot unite as effectively, then we have to bear in mind there is an international appetite at the moment, from India to the UK to the US. Like, there are resources, there are countless spaces and platforms, and there are international policies that have led to this point, that facilitate it, and that ensure that they are successful in what they do.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I haven't seen any evidence of Bannon being at the forefront of anything, but what I remember when he was being interviewed by BBC, straight when after a year after Trump got into power, and the questions that were being asked, he was a genius in terms of answering the questions and actually making Trump look good. And I think what's happened is that, and this is me being anecdotal and there's no real evidence, is that how people can actually be racist and Islamophobic and spin it in such a way and not even apologise for it. And I don't know if he's working behind the scenes in providing this type of training. Because he even, I mean, one thing that stuck in my head was that when asked about whether Trump was being racist towards blacks and Muslims and whatnot, and he said, he spun it in such a way, he said that, oh, it's under Trump that more Latinos and blacks are being employed than in Obama's time. And even to the point of asking the question about Trump got caught on audio saying that, where he very explicitly said that you grabbed women's private parts, he even spun that. And just think how he even got out of that. Like even the BBC journalist wasn't able to kind of catch him on it. And that's what's worrying since he raised it. Like it's the fact that whether Bannon is actually working behind the scenes, and they're now training these kind of politicians to actually get out of any kind of tricky situation. And Boris never apologised for all his remarks, and he even said that, there's some comments that you were digging up from 30 years ago. I was even a politician, so it's okay, right? That's really worrying, actually. It would be interesting to see where actually Bannon is now.
Just to say, you asked a very important question. I don't know the answer to your question, but I would definitely say that it needs to be researched, and that it is important that we find out these things and put them out. Whether they accept them, whether they put them in the media or not, it's irrelevant. What we need to do is to make sure that we know who is it that's supporting people like Boris Johnson and what that means. I mean, when Tommy Robinson comes out and says he gives Boris his vote, you've got to remember that Donald Trump, some of the people that came out to give him their support in the early days were the Ku Klux Klan. They came out and they gave Nazi CCAR salutes to him when he came. So let's be under no illusion about that and make sure that even if it's not mainstream, it's pushed it. We know who we're talking about.
So there's something for our collective to do this that I think is important and needs to not be lost in the excitement of what might be quite a bumpy ride over the next few months as a research job that somebody needs to do.
I just want to agree with the others actually, and just need to find out who's funding all of these things and supporting them, normalising them as well. Like when, as he said, Boris Johnson, he said stuff about Muslim women, and he's never apologised. And we actually went to a hustings before, that was a couple of weeks ago, and we brought that up with the Tory councillor there, and so she was like, but that was totally taken out of context. And we brought a few points up, but she kept saying it was totally taken out of context. So I don't know what you're saying. She just didn't want to accept that it didn't even happen. So they just brush it under the carpet or whatever, and they get away with it, which is very sad.
I think to a certain extent we have to ask ourselves, is an apology what we require from a man that we don't believe? Whose every political move throughout his entire life represents an opposition to our existence and to our freedoms. And so I think it's also about, and this, was also highlighted around the definitions around Islamophobia. I personally was like, look, I'll support your desire to make inroads, but be under no illusion this definition is not going to, you're simply asking for a recognition, for God's sake. We're at the point where it's open season on Muslims and we are discussing the nitty-gritties of definition instead of using all those energies, all that expertise, all those platforms, all those institutions to mobilize people in their hundreds of thousands to oppose the war on Muslims, which is where we're at currently. And I think that the same goes with the likes of Boris, because we've also seen it in relation to the left. We've been canvassing for new, very young MPs that said stupid things when they were very, very young, when they were politically ill-informed. None of us are born with, like, you know, having memorized capital or whatever. Like, we come to this, we come to the movements, we learn, we develop, we change our views. That is the point on why we organise. It is to change people's minds. It is to provide information and to counter hateful disinformation. And I think that, so do we necessarily want to be playing this thing of like, well, you forced him to apologise, so he has to apologise. I understand the public show and recognition that something is bad, but from a government whose ideologies and political line is very, very clear, whose political life has been anything but to support those most vulnerable in society, we have to be far more strategic and specific around what we're going to pressure them and force them to do in relation to relieving the hate, ending the systematic oppression and repression of Muslims and dissenting communities more widely, and migrants, of course, rather than necessarily focusing on these elements. And Bannon, you don't need any in-depth research. He's been very vocally clear about where he's putting his money, who he's meeting with. He's actually very, what's the word? He's incredibly proud of it. He's actually boasting about it. I've written numerous articles in Middle East Eye around some of these interviews. Like, you're in shock at the levels of openness, that is a confidence and their ability to get away with effectively inciting murder on minority communities.
I'm sure that's right, but we really very often do is settle the wood for the trees and then disappear areas of other technical issues when we have a whole lot on our hands. Yeah. There's any more points people would like to raise? While we're thinking about it, it's something I wouldn't mind coming back to. We started with, we've been talking a bit about the E-word, extremism. It has quite a long history as we use the word, but the history in our times kind of begins with preventing and countering violent extremism and the wider international countering violent extremism program, and then moves on to the extremism, counter-extremism commission, whatever exactly is its name now. When around all those policies, there's a government policies that have quite a coercive element to them. But when those policies first came into being, there was quite widespread questioning of the use of that word. It seemed very vague, it seemed problematic. It seems now to be becoming internalised by people. We accept countering extremism as being a good thing to do. So that, for instance, there are organisations, I'm thinking of one in particular called Hope Not Hate, that many people engage with and support as an anti-fascist organisation. But its aims aren't set out as anti-fascism, its aims are set out as anti-extremism. So, in order to demonstrate its balance in fighting fascism, it also wants to fight extremism, particularly Islamist extremism, as it would call it, which is, I think, the first part of that phrase is also one that I think people here would dispute. And the organisations represented here were among the organisations targeted. You know, we've tried to caution people about that some time ago. The Hope Not Hate does have a following as an anti-fascist organisation. This year, we saw that same organisation going into a Labour Party fringe meeting run by Labour against the witch hunts, treating that meeting exactly the way we would treat a fascist meeting, effectively infiltrating it and then passing negative comment about the supposed extremism of speakers like Jackie Walker, who some people here will have heard speaking. More recently than that, we've had in Dundee, standing for Labour was a guy called Jim Malone, who's a former officer in the FBU, who was one of a delegation that took a fire engine and equipment to Palestine. He's very well known and respected in the Scottish trade union movement, and Hope Not Hate went to the papers with smears directed at him, not actually over anything he said, but about comments made by people he'd associated with in his campaign. Now the problem with
Richard, he actually, Jim's crime was to tell two things about his own father. His father, as a British squaddie, had been to Bergen-Belsen in 1945 for the liberation of the death camp, and then his father had gone to Palestine and been horrified. So for talking about his own father's life, he was accused by Hope Not Hate and others of anti-Semitism.
Thank you very much. It's actually even worse than the proposed testimony, which particularly surprised me. But the problem with all this is not just that it's fueled some specific and destructive fears, but that it's encouraged all of us to throw away politics. You know, the way most of us on the left see fascism isn't as some extreme on some spectrum of bad manners. You know, fascism has a specific role in smashing particularly working class organisations and exploiting racism and building upon xenophobic and reactionary ideas that are embedded more widely in society. It's not about being one extreme balanced against another extreme. So all the time, this language that's been constructed by the state in order to bureaucratise politics for its purpose is now creeping into the way we discuss more politics more widely. It's robbing us of the language to discuss what's happening around us. And again, I'd like to pass it back to the panel for comments on what's developing around that word, extremism, both the machinery that's developing around it and the mission creep of it into how all of us think about politics.
In 2017, Theresa May tried to pass through a bill called the Extremism Bill, where they would determine what is and what isn't an extremist. And if you'll remember that David Cameron tried to develop or to say and define what extremism was, and it was an opposition to fundamental British values, which included a belief in democracy. So let's just test each one of these. In Egypt, did Britain support the coup, or did they support the democratically elected government there? Of course, they were silent on the coup. There was in Algeria, a feast one in 1992, the Islamic Salvation Front. Britain was silent on that when they cancelled elections, and then soon as civil war happened. They were silent, and in fact helped bring the narrative against Hamas when they won the elections in Palestine, and actually designated them to be terrorists. So they clearly don't care about democracy when it happens from a different side. Yet on the opposite, if you see in the in the Gulf states, there are all autocracies, all monarchies, where there is not a scent of democracy at all. So there is no respect to democracy. And also the rule of law. Well, if it's about the rule of law, then as I said, how many people have been involved, how many people have been prosecuted for evidently being involved in war crimes, whether it's Tony Blair or Bush or others, Jack Straw and others, either involved in Iraq or in the torture program. And a respect for other people's views, and that's laughable. The other thing is that there is a commission for countering extremism that's being developed, because they couldn't. One of the reasons why the bill couldn't be passed as law is that they couldn't reach an agreement as to what is extremism. And I wrote an article for Middle East Eye where I said that the term extremism now is so defunct that they are throwing it at one another within Parliament. Rory Stewart, one of the 21 MPs who had the whip taken away from him on Brexit, said while he's campaigning to become the mayor of London, is that I don't recognise this party of extremists. He's talking about the Tories. Philip Hammond also said that the extremists have taken over. Philip Hammond was the Chancellor, said that about Boris Johnson. They said it about, I think The Guardian said it about Jo Swinson. You can say all sorts of things about the Lib Dems and Jo Swinson, but I wouldn't think she's an extremist. But they called her an extremist because she would, if she came into power, stop Brexit by any means necessary. Malcolm X style. So what does this extremism mean? It's nothing. It doesn't mean anything. And I actually tweeted to this Commission for Counter-Extremism, are you going to be investigating Boris Johnson because the allegations have been made by two members of senior members of his party? And of course, it renders, these words and terms are rendered meaningless. They use it to talk about Muslims, they're talking about some people on the far right and some on the left, and the more you throw it about, the more meaningless it becomes. At some point, Nelson Mandela was not just an extremist, he was a terrorist. At some point, Martin Luther King was an extremist. He was in prison and was arrested 29 times. At some point, Gandhi was definitely an extremist because he spoke against the British Empire. So I think most people recognize that the more you say this term, the less it's had any meaning.
Not much to add, to be honest, but the actual definition of extremism actually is not defined anymore. So it's done with the purpose of being vague so that they can use it as they please against groups of people, and in many cases Muslims. And also we are accused of using the tools within democracy to undermine democracy. So we can't use anything else, but when the very tools and apparatus that's available to us, we apply that, then we are undermining democracy as well. So there's no winning.
Interests.
Yeah, interests.
Either doing the castle if you don't do that, or your interests if you do.
Then you're separatists.
Anything else from? Sure, I can see a question bubbling somewhere.
Thank you for the speakers. I'm just going to make a comment that actually recently when Boris Johnson was speaking about the manifesto of the Tories, if they win elections, was that they will ban the council of actually investing in the BDS movement because it undermines community cohesion. And these actually terms like democracy, community cohesion, Muslim or minority communities integration has been used actually in order to force Muslims to integrate. And when I use the word integrate, I use it between quotations, actually to submit to a majority thinking. It's not about integration because Muslims have already integrated and Muslims are part of the society. I'm talking about British Muslims. But this, he has not actually broken down how would council investment within the BDS would undermine community cohesion if community cohesion was only a monolithic thinking of that actually the community has to support Zionism. Thank you.
I think that I don't know. For me, things are bad enough that this attempt to reclaim definitions, where there is a huge power imbalance in terms of institutional weight, and despite the fact that with all these terms, and particularly the CE and CT kind of apparatus, not having legitimate academic backing and support and evidence, it doesn't matter. They have the most powerful institution in their views to be able to peddle whatever it is that's necessary. But to always remember that when the state ever speaks of protection, security, cohesion, unity, it is talking about its own interests. It is talking about it at the cost of the masses. And it is not on the terms of the liberation of freedom and the liberties of all. And so on that basis, these attempts to reclaim become wasted energy, in my view. That this is why there has to be an absolute rejection. And I think the brother highlighted in the earlier panel around interfaith as being a hijacked space as well. So it's time for us to decide on what interfaith campaigns look like, because for far too long there's been interest groups and think tanks and government departments and so on that have capitalised and used this, and I've seen it so violently used within students' union spaces as well. If you consider that many of, that there are a lot of religious students that come from international backgrounds, who are Muslims, who are Jewish students, who are all dealing with the ramifications of right-wing racist policies on the ground, and whilst their oppression is being weaponised from the top, they are dealing with the aggressive reality of day by day. And interfaith spaces should right now be some of the most radical spots of organising communities against hate, to march, to occupy, to block, to hold at a standstill our societies until, serious action has been taken around it and our government is held accountable. That's not happening. It is being used to facilitate and to shut down the ability to come together, to collectivise our struggles, to recognise that we have shared desires and demands for a better, actual, safe and secure world in which we can actually live together in actual cohesion. So I think that, and it's been a great battle of depoliticisation, so all of these terms, all these departments, it's deep-rooted, kind of the inroads into the equality diversity sector as well, have all been to absolutely destroy and depoliticise our struggles, and we just have to be aggressively in opposition to that and create an alternative and stop thinking that in relation to these spaces, certainly when they are state-funded and run, that there are going to be any changes from within.
Yeah, I think we as SACC have shared for a long time this general concern around not necessarily interfaith as a word concept, but around the specific interfaith organisations that exist. But our approach as a campaign is to bring people together around political goals, bring people of all faiths and none, where those people have their politics informed by religion, where for them religion is an important component of politics. We welcome that as part of the political discussion we're all having, but we don't say these two people should be talking to each other purely on the basis that they're both people of faith, and talking on that, around that. The problems we're all confronting, above all political ones, we need to be organising on a political basis. Having said that, people who live religious lives are interested in having faith-based discussions, and I know that NWAE have engaged with people of other faiths on their own initiative outside the structures of interfaith organisations, and that's perhaps rather a different kind of a question. I don't know if Tasneem might.
Tomorrow there's going to be an event in Edinburgh. It's a Palestinian event celebrating Jerusalem as the centre of Palestine. So there's been, I was helping with that, and I was asked to organise some childcare. But the organisation that we get the childcare from, they wanted to obviously know where it was and what room you were using, but we weren't allowed to tell them that in case it got cancelled because it was at a university. And so it's only been yesterday that we've been able to tell them that. So this is like, Muslims are afraid. Okay? All of this has made Muslims very afraid. And I don't know how, but we as Muslim Women's Association kind of become more political with the help of people like Richard and Pete, and it's like not about politics anymore, it's about humanness, it's about protecting humans, yeah, and your real life experiences and what we're going through, protecting those, helping those a little bit, making a little change on the ground. So that's what we're doing. We can't do the big things because we don't have the big money or the big organisations or anything like that. But definitely, I think that's what Muslims need to be doing. We need to be working with other groups who are not Muslim, who are fighting for us. Mike Maker does a fantastic job for, organising all these events and everything. But we hardly see any Muslims at these events.
They're talking about courage. I'd like to thank Richard and SACC for being partners with us all throughout the years and the work that they've done. And as Moazzam Begg mentioned, how many Muslims shied away from campaigning against or for the detainees in Guantanamo Bay. Unfortunately, still open. It reminds me of many people don't know, or if they do know, is that when Malcolm X was assassinated, we all love to quote him now, we all love to kind of make him our own. But the Muslim community in America was not willing to do his funeral prayer in a mosque. Muslims were shying away from facilitating the prayer, and his funeral prayer actually took place in a church. As a result, his family, there's deep hurt there, that he gave his life for the community, and this very community has actually kind of isolated his family and not taking care of his last wishes. And I think there needs to be moral and spiritual courage amongst all of us, especially amongst Muslims, when it comes to kind of.
I think the battery's probably gone. If you have the roving mic here, please.
It's fine. So, again, going back to Moazzam Begg's case, this is well after when Moazzam Begg was released. I was in, I'm not going to mention the names, but I was in a prominent Muslim organisation. I was holding Moazzam Begg's book. And one of the very senior individuals who, when they saw the book in the office, they almost had a seizure. So why do you have this book here? Or why are you reading him? Why are you talking about Guantanamo Bay? And we honestly lack this moral and spiritual courage. We do. It's written in our scriptures all over the place. And hundreds, if not millions of people have sacrificed their lives for this. And going back to the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, we are forgetting that it actually goes back to a conversation we had in 2008. In 2008, I think, when we were walking down the streets, when we were having a tour, and Moazzam Begg was saying, we were having a conversation, Moazzam Begg was saying that there will come a time in Britain where there will be racism, and people have to take our arms just to protect themselves. And we are witnessing this now. We are literally witnessing this. And I didn't want to believe what he was saying, but the foresight Moazzam had then, it's unfortunately come to fruition. We are seeing hijabis being strangled without a hijab, and then the individuals who are perpetrating violence are getting away with caution. Stereotypes ahead, so we definitely need to have moral and spiritual courage, and we need to form. This is one of the discussions that we're having earlier on in the workshop, is that we are very poor at forming alliances with each other. And a valid point was raised earlier on how different pots of funding was used to kind of segregate different groups so that they're not united. And we need to kind of rise above that. And this, at Islamic Human Rights Commission, we've invested a lot of time in decolonising the mind and running workshops. But we really need to understand where and how the history of institutional racism comes from, and the very tactics they use throughout the centuries they have used. You know, whether it's looking at even Fanon talks about the different types of violence. Just because something's not physical doesn't mean it's not violent. We need to understand that what we're going through now, the way our spaces are shrinking, is a form of violence. The threat of violence, the threat of being captured, the threat of being imprisoned, the threat of being our livelihood being taken away is a form of violence. We need to understand that, where that comes from and where these tactics come from. It was applied in South Africa during the apartheid time, and it would be applied. It was applied in slavery in America, and it will be applied here again in Britain.
Can I just add? I think that, I'm all for rallying calls and organising the masses, but there is a specific, and we all know that there is a very specific reason why Muslims in particular, in light of rising Islamophobia, very, very aggressive, violent forms of Islamophobia that is being what's the word, that is being transported abroad, is that there is a relentless onslaught, and Muslim institutions' response are that we must preserve this space at all costs, and if that means playing on their terms, then that is what we must do to survive. Along the way, many leaderships forget that actually, if it ultimately just becomes protecting the space for the sake of protecting the space, it is no longer what we believe to be, the purpose of a masjid, of a collective space in which we pray, in which we rally, in which we, serve our Creator. At least not in what we see from the teachings, the examples of the prophets, peace be upon them, and all figures throughout Islamic history. And so I think that it's both needing to understand the context where there are spies in the mosques, there are cameras, there are endless attacks, there are witch hunts of our leaderships, even those that completely bow down to the state and its demands, that have been complicit in our continued oppression and heightened repression. It doesn't matter. It is coming, and it is coming after all of us. And so it is about building confidence, and actually the coalitions need to be built across the board. It doesn't just lie on the shoulders of Muslims, who are facing a very particular form of violence right now. The responsibility is for all of us, because whilst we may be the catch of the day, we're just like a visible excuse for what is happening across society, and therefore the entirety of our society needs to organise around these questions and to mobilise against it. And I think we have to bear that in mind, whilst also always ensuring that we hold our leaders and institutions to account. Muslim institutions have been part of the problem, undeniably. We don't need to name names, we all probably know in this room, who has decided to sit at what tables and make whatever deals that they decided to make. Whilst activists on the grassroots and victims were screaming in opposition. But we are where we are, and our struggle has not differed, our need to organise has not differed. The urgency of it has only intensified, and so we must carry on, irrespective of what any elite in whatever space chooses to do, based on its need and desire to maintain power and institutional legitimacy.
It's always a pleasure sharing a platform with Malia, and I have to say, I've seen her through struggles. I saw when she got attacked while she was the president of the National Union of Students, and she didn't flinch, though it was really hurting. She hit back, and she's still doing it. She doesn't learn. So the only thing I want to say really is I'm glad she's on our side.
Thank you. See if anybody else. We'll probably take a few more questions if there are any, and then go to closing remarks from all the speakers. So now's our chance. It's me just thinking in half an hour's time. I think there's something you'd like to say. Anybody?
Giving people enough chance. Nobody's talked about it, but we're talking about Islamophobia, and we're talking about closing down public spaces for conversation. The IHRA definition did not come from a Jewish group in Idaho. It came quite deliberately from the International Holocaust Remembrance Association. Now, when you mention the Holocaust and Nazi mass killing, a lot of people run for the exits. They're afraid, and that's understandable. The Israelis have a very special connection, the Israeli government, with the so-called Visegrad group. That's the group of ultra-nationalist states inside the EU. Hungary, Slovakia, Poland, and I think the Czech Republic. I'm not sure. That's 3 of the 4. So close is their relationship that Israel, Netanyahu, was hosting a summit, a European summit of the Visegrad group in Israel. the wheels came off because the Israelis and the Poles had a big fight about the Holocaust. Both of them were rancid, both of their positions were horrendous, and both of them involved the notion of collective guilt. The Israelis said the Poles were collectively guilty for the Holocaust in Poland. Now, my question is this. I think if you look at the Holocaust in Poland, the Israelis were dead wrong. There was no national collective guilt. I think the Polish government was dead wrong. There was no Polish absolution. You can't say there was no involvement. If you look at the history, the middle classes and the upper classes in Poland were anti-Semitic before the Nazis came in. The working class parties fought the anti-Semites until they could fight no longer. The only way to understand the Holocaust was to see that through a class analysis. That's true for Cable Street, it's true for Germany, it's true across Europe, and it's certainly true for Poland. Now, my question is, don't we need to actually engage with this most difficult of subjects in order to take the weapon away from those people who want to shut us down? Because the Holocaust is, the Holocaust is the greatest crime in human history, the mass killing of Jews, disabled Germans, Roma, homosexuals, Serbs, Russians, Poles, and so on. Right? No, anybody who denies that should be chastised. But don't we need to engage with the subject? Don't we need to educate people about the reality of this European crime, this blood-soaked continent of ours, in order to be able to deal with the Zionists and their allies' attack on us?
Palestine is not normally my subject, so I don't claim any expertise on it. But I went to a Jewish school as a child, as a primary school, and a lot of my friends in primary school grew up to go and move to Israel, and it was normal for them. What was interesting, though, for me was this notion of anti-Semitism and how it existed within Europe. Western Europe. Britain, when the Jews were expelled from there. If you go to York, and the famous Clifford Tower and what happened there with a group of Jews who were put in there and burnt alive. If you look at the Merchant of Venice, for example, and how that scene, Shylock is in Shakespeare the greatest poet in history, arguably, writes about Shylock as a character that is deeply odious, to say the least. But it was quite normal at the time to talk about Jews in that way, and it was a very European thing. And if you move on further, you look at which governments or governments in Europe actually, how did the Holocaust happen? It wasn't just the Nazis doing it. They had plenty of collaborators. Half of France collaborated, the Vichy government collaborated with and sent over thousands of Jews, as did many of the others. I think we need to just kind of get into context that this was a very European, anti-Semitism was a very European construct. Because when the Jews were being expelled from Britain, from England, where were they going to? Al-Andalus, Spain, to Ottoman Turkey, to the Muslim land, where Muslims they didn't believe, as Christian Europe had believed, historically through the Crusades and beyond, is that they killed our God. Muslims don't believe that God was killed. So we didn't have an ideological problem with the Jews in that sense. And so this was a very European construct. And for some Muslims and the Muslim world to be accused of anti-Semitism, it doesn't make sense. Because historically speaking, the Jews prospered in Muslim lands. And so I think this, again, have to say, Europe needs to take a deep look at itself. Historically speaking, why do you do this? Why do you take a group of people because you don't like them, you don't like how they dress, you don't like their dietary laws, you don't like how they conduct themselves, you don't like their language? You can see all of the similarities, what happened. I remember walking through the streets of Warsaw a few years ago and into the old Jewish quarter that's preserved. And I thought, okay, well, there's lots of similarities here with the Muslims. Visible similarities. And it's that otherization that happened, though they had integrated in their own particular way. that it was easy to otherize them at a time of economic crisis and say that these people don't belong, though they've been there for hundreds of years. And I can see parallels for us too.
I think that in relation to the spread of information and the need to inform, I think that this is why history, who tells it, is so crucial, and why the role of the collective memory of the people and their engagement and involvement in the ways that people access information, history, stories, understand what happened and what the lessons learned must be people-led. And I think that it would have been a great aspect of the Labour Manifesto around the realities of empire, the realities of the atrocities committed in the name of the British Empire for people across this continent and around the world. And I think that fight continues. I've seen some teachers through sections of the National Education Union. I don't know what the Scottish equivalent is, or if it is part of the NEU, but anyway, taking part in creating alternative curriculum, but also deciding to take it upon themselves to provide that alternative information, because as it stands, as laid out in the name of British values, the history that needs to be told on the question of the Holocaust, on the role and responsibilities of this island in particular, in relation to that, provide lessons and warnings, and in some ways a call to arms and accountability and reparations and so on and so forth. It involves a very long look at itself in terms of the state and huge long-term work in terms of taking responsibility and rebuilding that I cannot expect the government to take it upon itself to decide to do whilst it continues to be in talks with no neo-Nazis and fascists, as our Prime Minister has been doing in recent years. And so this comes back to us, as it always does. And I think that teaching unions are crucial inroads to that. There is a huge willingness by teachers around the UK to reverse the wave of death and destruction and misinformation that is peddled from the top. And I think that we have to organise on those grounds and decide to do so for the sake of what is to come, and for us to know what has been in order to be strong enough to fight what is to come.
Actually, do some of that through Holocaust Genocide Memorial Day, and actually the education work through the poetry work with to which children and young people contributed. So, do you see that as connected to the next question?
I mean, the Genocide Memorial Day. Before it came to fruition, there was a number of years where the Muslim community was debating with the Holocaust Memorial Day that you need to make it more inclusive instead of just being exclusive to the Jewish community. And none of the actually at one point MCP even endorsed HMD and went along with it, and then there was a massive backlash from the community, and as a result they kind of reversed that position. The issue is this definition of anti-Semitism and the way it's gone, and the fact that how it is creeped into the fact that where being anti-Israel or being anti-Zionist is synonymous with being anti-Semitic. And so I think with the Genocide Memorial Day, what we're trying to do is that it's trying to kind of raise awareness of all the various different genocides that have taken place since 1492, from the kind of campaign of Columbus going over to the Americas and how colonialism kind of spread all over the world, but also how Bosnia and Herzegovina kind of relates back to modern times. How if if we don't kind of educate our children and the generations that come forward about how we fall into sleepwalking to genocide, that we will witness genocide all over again. And so I guess what we're trying to do through Genocide Memorial Day is get children to take part in a poetry competition where they talk about a particular genocide, and then as a result, the winner and their parents will go to Bosnia and Herzegovina and attend the Srebrenica Memorial, but also not just Srebrenica, because there's this kind of effort to make the genocide that took place in that region isolated to Srebrenica, because Srebrenica was a mass genocide, yes, but it wasn't isolated to that region. And what we're trying to do through GMD or Genocide Memorial Day, there's another charity that was formed on the back of it. Again, I don't want to mention no names, but they're just, again, it's well funded by different agencies and the government to kind of concentrate about the genocide just being in Srebrenica. But there were mass graves all over the country, and Moazzam would know because he did charity work out there. So I think we do need to kind of reclaim the narrative, and we need to continue to do that and support each other in doing so.
Thanks, Ahmed. Malia has time to catch, so I'm just going to give her, if she has time, an opportunity for a quick closing remarks, and then she'll go and then we'll let the question come.
If it wasn't clear by everything I said throughout the panel, organise. Let us build coalitions that build on the momentum that has been over the last few years. There is a reason why we mobilised so strongly behind Corbyn, and it was because in many ways he wasn't a politician, because we know the realities of our political system and the limitations of that, and so our expectations and our need to build around campaigns, to build our opposition, to build our resistance, go beyond the political system itself. It is long term. The fruits of it, may not be, we may not see the fruits of it in our lifetime, but we fight as if it is as if a new world is possible tomorrow. If you need anything from me, I have a sister that lives in Glasgow, so I have no excuse. I have a place to stay, so call on me whenever you need. And I hope that this is the start of something exciting, something important, and something that will hit the powers that be where it is necessary. Thank you so much, solidarity as well.
I'm just going to go to closing remarks from everybody, but I'd just like to add something based on what Mick just said. Really, 2 points, one very general and one very specific on behalf of the campaign. The general thought is that those two hostilities to Jews and Muslims were part of the formation of political power in Europe. Before modern nation states existed, there was something around which Europe, expressed in the term Christendom, was trying to construct political power, and that predated quite a lot of what we think of as the origins of racism. It predated the transatlantic slave trade, and predated words like racism, but it's there in the heart of the building of even the word Europe is anachronistic at that time, but it's there in the heart of the construction of a political entity in Europe. But the more specific point I want to make is, we as a campaign, SACC, we don't support the Ash'ari definition of anti-Semitism. Sure, the first sentence is fine, but there's a big problem about the examples and the way that those examples have been used, so we don't support it. So it was very good to see that within the Labour Party there was a fight, or at least the beginnings of a fight, around the Ash'ari definition, and disappointing that fight collapsed. But in Scotland there's been no such fight, the Scottish Government has adopted that definition with essentially no debate, no fights. The ruling party is the SNP. Quite a lot of members are very strongly supportive of Palestine. They've been reluctant to trigger the sort of destructive arguments we've seen elsewhere around this. But it does matter because although in general I completely agree with the points people have made that arguing over definitions can be a waste of time, sometimes it matters where definitions are taken up by bureaucratic structures that have the power to deny us space at universities. We can fight all that, we can organise in other rooms, but the people we reach shrinks. It does matter. We do need a fight around that issue, and I would particularly welcome the many friends and colleagues we have in the SNP taking that issue up. It's unfinished business in Scotland, and it's going to cause us all difficulties sooner or later. But unless anybody else has anything to say from the audience, I think I'm just going to invite some quick closing remarks from all of our speakers. Who wants to go first? Ahmed?
To be honest, what Malia said, I've got nothing more to add, to be honest. We do need to kind of not get deflated with the loss of Corbyn as the leader of the Labour Party. We should be inspired to kind of go and build on that momentum and do what we need to do, form alliances and keep the battle up and the fight up. Let's see if we can build a better future for everyone.
I think this election, the run-up to this election is important. A lot of children have gotten involved, young people have gotten involved, just because they can see what Jeremy Corbyn was standing for and they liked it and they could relate with it. So I think it's really good. We should use the energy of the young people and just keep that going, because if you ask anybody, people go, oh, I hate Boris Johnson. Even in his face, they don't want to look at his face even, or Donald Trump. So I think the young people are the way forward now. We need to use their energy and educate them properly, like my man was saying, that try to change the curriculum, bring that into the schools, or even in our youth groups, what we're doing, in our mosques, and the Holocaust, tell our children about it and how it all came about.
My best friend is Shakir Ahmed. He's a man who's from Medina, but settled in Medina in Saudi Arabia, but settled in the UK and married a British woman. He was detained in Guantanamo for 14 years without charge or trial. He was released in 2015. One of the first people he met was Jeremy Corbyn, who welcomed him into Parliament, and he embraced him, he hugged him, and Jeremy Corbyn, Shakir told me that Jeremy had tears in his eyes, genuinely cared about what had happened. There was a cross-party campaign across some Tories, some Lib Dems who were campaigning against Guantanamo, so it wasn't just one group of people. But the thing I want to tell you about this is Shakir Ahmed, to me, suffered for his beliefs. The reason why he stayed 11 years longer in Guantanamo than I did, because he used to campaign for prisoners' rights. He used to go on hunger strike, inspired by other hunger strikers from around the world, fighting for the rights of the prisoners, fighting for the rights to get a lawyer, fighting for the rights to get decent food, fighting for the rights to have decent clothing, fighting for the rights just to get a phone call to the families that they hadn't seen for 14 years. And those rights meant that he remained in prison longer. And what I want you to think about is that we need to celebrate within our little communities whoever we know, an individual that stood up for something, spoke out for something, was targeted for something. We need to celebrate them. We need to remind our children of such people. We need to inculcate them, whichever tradition we're from. Everybody respects somebody who suffers for their beliefs. Everybody respects that, even if you disagree with them. And if we are able to build upon that and to teach future generations, no matter what's going to happen, you just don't bow your head down to an oppressor. And so I'm going to finish with a very controversial statement, which is about jihad. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said that the best jihad is to speak a word of truth in front of an oppressor. So I think we can all do the best jihad.
we need to clear this room fairly quickly. That's if people do, we have the space upstairs, the Garrett Hill room, for a bit longer. If people feel they would like some end of conference discussion, let me know or one of the stewards know, and we'll facilitate that. If we feel we've had enough room to go home, that's cool too. But we do have the space longer if we need it. Here's our good stuff.